Welcome to Washington Today for Monday, May 22nd, 2023. I'm Gary Sterikoff. Thanks a lot for listening today. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is heading to the White House for another meeting with President Biden as pressure builds to reach an agreement on the debt ceiling before the U.S. defaults on its loan obligations in less than 2 weeks. Senator Tim Scott, the South Carolina Republican, formally announced he is officially in the 2024 race for president, and the NAACP issued a formal travel advisory for Florida, saying the state has become, quote, hostile to Black Americans under the leadership of Republican Governor Ron DeSantis. We'll start at the Capitol, where House Speaker Kevin McCarthy talked to reporters before today's White House meeting.
I mean, you're 10 days out, so the president has to be serious. And I've been very clear from the very beginning. We are in this problem because when the Democrats took the overall majority just a few years ago, they spent $6 trillion. That brought us inflation. That brought us banks closing. But it spent too much. It's a real challenge of where we're going. So we have to spend less next year than we spend this year.
Today's meeting takes place after a phone conversation between Speaker McCarthy and President Biden yesterday, and after Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen sent a letter this afternoon to the Speaker that warned that the U.S. could default on its debt payments on June 1st.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light?
That's how today's event in North Charleston, South Carolina began, as Senator Tim Scott announced he's in the race to become the Republican Party's 2024 presidential nominee.
I have lived that the closest thing to magic in America is a good education. But today, the far left has us retreating away from excellence in schools. Extreme liberals are letting big labor bosses trap millions of kids in failing schools. They're replacing education with indoctrination. They spent COVID locking kids out of the classroom, and now they're locking kids out of their futures. And in Biden's America, crime is on the rise and law enforcement is in retreat. The far left is ending cash bails. They're demonizing, demoralizing, and defunding the police. I grew up in neighborhoods alongside people who ended up incarcerated or in the cemetery too, but cemetery as well. We needed more public safety, not less. We cannot have innocent people at risk, police officers getting ambushed and attacked, and seniors locked in their homes from the time the sun goes down until the sun comes up. Joe Biden and the radical left are attacking every single rung of the ladder that helped me climb. And that's why I'm announcing today that I'm running for president of the United States of America.
Senator Tim Scott is ranking member on the Banking Committee and one of the Senate's most formidable fundraisers. According to Axios, he enters the race with $22 million already on hand, and he's already made a $6 million ad buy in Iowa and New Hampshire. Here's more from his announcement event.
So, for those of you unaware of this, when I was a kid growing up and I was failing out of school, and my nephew just told a part of the story, it was Janice's husband then, John Moniz, who caught me at the right time, who helped me survive some really hard times. And for those of you who wonder if it's possible for a broken kid in a broken home to rise beyond their circumstances, the answer is yes. And for those of you who wonder if America is a racist country, take a look at how people come together. All of God's people come together. Black ones and white ones, the red ones and brown ones, working together Because love, unconditional love, binds hearts together. We are not defined by the color of our skin. We are defined by the content of our character. And if anyone tells you anything different, they're a lion.
Tim Scott is the second South Carolinian to enter the race for the Republican nomination. Former South Carolina governor and former UN ambassador Nikki Haley announced her candidacy in February. Also in the Republican race, former President Trump, former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson, entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is expected to enter the race soon. You can see all of Senator Tim Scott's presidential campaign announcement at cspan.org. Meanwhile, Delaware Democratic Senator Tom Carper has announced that he will retire at the end of his current term. The 76-year-old is the current chair of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. He's been in the Senate since 2001. He made the announcement on the Wilmington waterfront with his wife, Martha.
As the last year came to a close and the new one began, Martha and I began to focus on what I should do next. Run for a fifth term in the Senate, which if I had run and won would be a record, and then ride off into the sunset and just call it a day. After a good deal of prayer and introspection and more than a few heart-to-heart conversations, we decided I should do neither, but rather I should run through the tape over the next 20 months and finish the important work that my staff and I have begun on a wide range of fronts, many of them begun in partnership with Democrat and Republican colleagues in the Senate and in the House. At the top of the list is to oversee the implementation of major portions of our massive bipartisan infrastructure law with its record climate provisions that I helped to write and floor manage, along with the transformational clean energy transfer provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act. Implementation of both laws is indispensable. It will ultimately win the battle against global warming while creating tens of millions of American jobs in the years to come.
DelawareOnline.com called Senator Carper, quote, the patriarch of modern Delaware politics. He's held statewide office there since 1977. Here's more from today's announcement.
Any thoughts about who you'd like to see replaced?
Yeah, I think six years ago, we were torn as to whether I should run for re-election then. Martha and I have an anniversary on January 1st. On January 1st, 6 years ago, we went to the Green Room, the Hotel DuPont, had dinner, and Martha said, well, you're going to run or not for a fourth term? And I said, really, I haven't decided. I think maybe I should get out of the way and let others serve. And she said, no, you got to run. We need people like you in the Senate. And if you don't run, we'll have a big primary to tear the party apart. You got to run. And I ran. One of the people who could have run, maybe should have run 6 years ago, is our Congresswoman today, Lisa Blunt-Rochester. I know Lisa. Ed and I have known Lisa since she was an intern in our congressional office a million years ago. And as she came to a town hall meeting, she had a little baby girl in her lap and an unborn son in her womb. And she talked to me afterwards, and she said, I'm looking for a way to become involved in public life. And do you have any ideas? And I said, sure. We have internships, and why don't you be an intern? You're in graduate school, and when you finish up, maybe you can come to work with us. She finished graduate school. She came to work for us in the congressional office. And then later, when I became governor, she worked with us in the governor's office and became Deputy Secretary of Health and Social Services and later Secretary of Labor. We love Lisa. And I spoke with her this morning. I said, you've been patient, waiting for me to get out of the way, and I'm going to get out of the way. And I hope you run, and I hope you'll let me support you in that mission. And she said, yes, I will let you support me. And so I'm going to.
Did she say she's going to run?
Maybe I'll have to talk to her.
Tom Carper is the fourth Senate Democrat to announce plans to retire at the end of this term, joining Dianne Feinstein of California, Debbie Stabenow of Michigan, and Ben Cardin of Maryland. Congress is back in this week with that June 1st deadline to reach a debt ceiling deal. The House plans to take up an agreement once it's reached, followed by the Senate, which is currently on recess for the Memorial Day holiday. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says he will give lawmakers 24 hours notice to return to Washington to vote. And today, the House is considering 6 bills, including the final version of legislation to address the recent FAA system outages that halted airline flights. They're also authorizing a cost of living increase for veterans. And later in the week, members will vote to override the president's veto of legislation repealing a Commerce Department rule waiving tariffs on solar parts from China. And as the president and Speaker McCarthy are meeting at the White House, here's House Oversight Chair James Comer summing up the Republicans' debt ceiling position this morning on Fox News.
It's very unfortunate that Joe Biden has waited this long. This is another example of his lack of leadership. I don't know what he was expecting would happen. The Republicans in the House passed a bill in a timely manner, and the Senate Democrats and the president did nothing. And they waited and waited and waited, and now we're past the deadline that we really needed to have presented a bill in a timely manner. Remember, House Republicans want to give everyone an opportunity to do the unthinkable, to give everyone an opportunity to read the bill so we can know what's in the bill, so the media can know what's in the bill. That's called transparency. Joe Biden's used to just being in a back room, smoke-filled room, and coming up with something at the last minute. But we're not going to budge on spending cuts. Somebody has to be the adult in the room, and I'm proud of the work that the House Republicans have done and Speaker McCarthy has done in presenting a fiscally responsible bill. I think that's what the American people want, and I know that's what the American taxpayers want.
Meanwhile, Oversight Committee Democrat Jared Moskowitz of Florida told CNN that he's okay with talking about federal spending.
Well, let me say two things. Look, I think the American people, as they're tightening their spending, they want to see government do the same. That being said, it's nice to see my Republican colleagues all of a sudden care about spending. When President Trump was in charge, they racked up more debt in those 4 years than any other single president. It seems that they only care about spending when there's a Democrat in charge. That being said, I do think the American people want us to get a deal. I do think they want to see us figure out how we can spend less as they're spending less. But they also want to see us pay our bills. They get a bill in the month, every mail from their spending, and they know that they got to pay their bills. They don't get to say, well, before we pay our bill, let's discuss our spending, American Express or Visa. No, they have to pay their bill. Otherwise, there's real life consequences. And so we have to pay our bills. But listen, I think it's a fair conversation to talk about spending now, next year, the year after that, the year after that.
And here's Wall Street Journal congressional reporter Natalie Andrews on where things stand with both sides going into today's White House meeting.
Well, I've been talking to a wide swath of Republicans really all weekend as they're getting briefed and trying to figure out if anything the White House is offering is something that they'd be on board with. And they've been really frustrated. It sounds like, Dusty Johnson, who is co-chair of the Main Street Republican Caucus, which is, kind of your mainstream Republicans, he wants to see spending cuts as well. And they were frustrated the White House's offer over the weekend increased the spending for next year instead of decreased it. Chip Roy, House Freedom Caucus members, they're known for being more hardline on spending. They're frustrated. They issued a statement on Friday saying they'd like to see what House Republicans passed in April as the floor, which was always going to be difficult. So I think House Republicans are watching this very closely. Obviously, Kevin McCarthy doesn't want to lose a lot of Republicans at any negotiation because this is his team. He wants to bring them over the finish line. And I think negotiations this week will probably come down to how many he's willing to cut loose.
Then factor in the amount of days left until the supposed X date of June 1st. What has to happen in the 10 days or so that we're going to see? It's
going to be tight. House Republicans, in the deal that they scored in January when Kevin McCarthy was becoming Speaker, they scored an open process where they want to be able to bring amendments to the floor, where they have a 72-hour rule for legislation, which means if they're going to pass something this week, they need it on the floor by Tuesday, which is tomorrow, which is rapidly approaching. And that doesn't even begin to outline the calendar for the Senate. The Senate's out this week. If they come back on Tuesday, they have 2 days to pass something, which is a very hard lift in the Senate, as you know. So it's going to be intense. 10 days is hard to get anything through Congress. It's hard with a 3-day weekend. We could see recesses. Chuck Schumer said he'd call the Senate back if there was a deal, but that gets difficult. I'm sure that members scattered to Codels around the world, so it'll be interesting to see what happens.
If they get a rollback of spending, are all areas treated equally? Does the Defense Department see those cuts? Are there other areas that don't see those cuts? Where would those lines be drawn?
So that's a sticky part, because the Republicans have said they don't want to cut veteran funding and they don't want to cut defense. In fact, they'd like to increase defense. So that money has to come from elsewhere. And the White House is staunchly opposed to that. They say where that money would be taken would hurt things like education, early childhood education, or cancer research, or this discretionary spending that gets spread out in funds like that, which are typically domestic programs. They don't want to see the funding cut there.
We saw and heard from Democrats during the course of the morning from the Sunday shows backing the president on maybe using the 14th Amendment on this. And how is this a widespread thought amongst Democrats at this point, or is this like a final break glass kind of situation?
It's seen, the 14th Amendment, which is an interesting thing to have to go back and look at, because I think a lot of people associate the 14th Amendment with the Civil War, and we don't often suddenly pull back a 200-year-old rule from the archives, but it's seen as kind of a break glass emergency measure, would immediately be litigated, and so it would be really difficult to execute to continue doing it. The 14th Amendment basically says that the debt of the U.S. is guaranteed. So the idea is that these progressive Democrats are pushing Biden to say, I have the power under the 14th Amendment to act unilaterally. But it would instantly see court challenges, instantly probably be stopped or stayed by the court as this carried out. And as Janet Yellen has said, there's not a lot of time to debate this.
And it seems like she keeps saying this, and widespread or amongst Republicans and Democrats, that number doesn't resonate, or is that the case?
I think it's starting to. I think her comments on the Sunday shows yesterday were pretty clear. She said the June 1 date is there because by June 15th, the U.S. will be having a very hard time paying its bills. That comment seemed very clear, very specific. I think some lawmakers were taken aback because they expected maybe a mid-July date at some point. And so when she came out with June 1, there was some shock on the Hill.
Wall Street Journal congressional reporter Natalie Andrews on this morning's Washington Journal. You can see more at cspan.org/Washington Journal and the C-SPAN Now video app. And again, Treasury Secretary Yellen sending a letter this afternoon to Speaker McCarthy warning him that the U.S. could default on its debt payments on June 1st. You're listening to Washington Today.
Live Tuesday on C-SPAN Radio at 10 a.m. Eastern. A House Judiciary Subcommittee hearing on immigration and border security. Witnesses will include the mother of a young woman killed allegedly by an unaccompanied migrant child who is a gang member, and a city supervisor of Orangetown, New York, one of the communities where migrants from New York City are being relocated. And live Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, a House Homeland Security Subcommittee hearing on U.S. vulnerabilities to the Chinese Communist Party, with testimony from Homeland Security Department and FBI officials. Listen to C-SPAN Radio anywhere on your smart speaker. Say, play C-SPAN Radio.
Welcome back to Washington Today. The 7 western states that depend on the Colorado River have reached an agreement to cut water use by about 3 million acre-feet for the next 3 years. The Los Angeles Times called the agreement, quote, a major milestone in the region's efforts to grapple with the Colorado River's decline. The Times goes on to say that even though this year's runoff is nearly 150% of average thanks to several major winter storms, quote, state water managers think the agreement will be enough to keep reservoirs from reaching dangerously low levels, even if dry conditions return during the next 3 years. President Biden said in a statement, quote, today's agreement between the Department of Interior and 7 Colorado River Basin states on a consensus-based approach marks an important step forward in our efforts to protect the stability of the Colorado River system in the face of climate change and historic drought conditions. Thanks to my Investing in America agenda, we are deploying record resources to support water conservation and improve the Colorado River's long-term sustainability. That's a White House statement. Also today, President Biden nominated telecommunications attorney Ana Gomez to a seat on the Federal Communications Commission. Ms. Gomez is currently a senior advisor for international information and communications policy in the State Department's Bureau of Cyberspace and Digital Policy. She's previously served as Deputy Administrator for the National Telecommunications and Information Administration and was a senior legal advisor to William Kennard when he chaired the FCC. It's the president's second attempt to fill the empty seat on the typically 5-member panel. His last nominee, Gigi Sohn, withdrew herself from consideration following a years-long confirmation fight. One of the country's oldest civil rights organizations has put out a strongly worded warning about traveling to Florida. The NAACP's Florida travel notice starts by saying that under Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, the state of Florida, quote, has engaged in an all-out attack on Black Americans, accurate Black history, voting rights, members of the LGBTQ+ community, immigrants, women's reproductive rights, and free speech. The announcement comes as Governor DeSantis is expected to announce his candidacy for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination in the coming days. Here's NAACP President and CEO Derek Johnson.
Well, the governor has perfected the art of doing stunts to gain campaign contributions. Unfortunately, this will impact people's lives. We should not use race or othering as a tool to weaponize against people. And unfortunately, for a large percentage of the Floridians, that's what he has done. Therefore, we are advising African Americans and others that if you travel to Florida, beware that your life is not valued, that we have a political landscape that could cause harm as we prepare for the 2024 elections to right-size the political landscape in the state of Florida.
I want to ask you what you intended to accomplish with this. What are you hoping happens because of this advisory?
Well, we have talked to our members in the state of Florida, partner groups, individuals in the large African-American communities. And so for many, they were asking, what should we do? And we understand that many conventions are going to be held in Florida. So we are advising our members and others that if you go, be cautious of how you operate in the state. That if you have another choice to hold your convention, consider a place outside of Florida. But also, if you have to go there, let's support the local community as we prepare to change the political landscape. We didn't end here overnight. It was because of the election, so we have to prepare for the next election so we can get rid of him once and for all. The othering that we have seen first by Trump, now by him, is not only un-American, it's dangerous, and we have to right-size this landscape.
NAACP President and CEO Derek Johnson speaking on CNN earlier today. And the organization's statement comes after Governor DeSantis signed legislation last week defunding diversity programs in the state's public colleges. Governor DeSantis called a vote to issue the advisory, quote, a joke. That's a label that Florida Republican Congressman Byron Donalds agrees with.
This is just really stupid. It doesn't make any sense. Look, I've lived in Florida since 1996 after I graduated high school. I went to college, got married, started a career, lived normal life. Went to church, raised kids, coached sports. Yesterday when the Miami Heat, and congratulations to the Heat going up 3-0 on the Boston Celtics, by the way. But when the Miami Heat, were beating down the Celtics last night in Miami, TNT was showing footage of different boats in the water. Mm-hmm. And on a bunch of these different boats are black people having a good time out on the water. I don't even know what the NAACP is talking about. This is silly and it's dumb. It's political. It makes no sense. We should be focused on making sure people actually have the opportunity to achieve, which Florida is actually doing and thriving in way better than other states, let's say New York or California or Washington State. We're doing a significantly better job helping black Americans succeed. And it's not just about me, it's about all the millions of black people that live in our state.
Florida Republican Congressman Byron Donalds speaking on Fox News this morning. New State Department spokesman Matt Miller took to the podium for the first time today, and one of his first questions was on the fighting in the Ukrainian city of Bakhmut. According to Reuters, Ukraine said on Sunday that its forces were still working to encircle the city after Russian President Vladimir Putin congratulated the Wagner private army and Russian troops for capturing it. Here's more about Ukraine from today's State Department briefing.
So in Belgrade, there are obviously these reports, and there's images online that suggest American weapons have been used. So I know you don't know, but do you support U.S. weapons being used on Russian territory, and would that change the calculus of providing F-16s to Ukraine?
So with respect to the calculus of providing F-16s to Ukraine, the president has made very clear that we will begin training the Ukrainian military to pilot F-16s, and we will work with our allies and partners on the provision of F-16s to Ukraine. I don't have any announcements about when or how that will happen or what countries they'll come from, but it is a priority for us, and we will begin to implement that in the coming months. And then with respect to the broader policy question, we have made very clear to the Ukrainians that we don't enable or encourage attacks outside Ukrainians' borders. But I do think it's important to take a step back and remind everyone and remind the world that, of course, it is Russia that launched this war. It's Russia that continues to launch attacks on civilians in Ukraine. It's Russia that's targeted schools and hospitals and civilian infrastructure. So it is up to Ukraine to decide how they want to conduct their military operations, but it is Russia that has been the aggressor in this war.
New State Department spokesman Matt Miller. Another topic at today's briefing, the Chinese government's statement over the weekend that called products from U.S. memory chip giant Micron Technology a national security risk.
China announced yesterday that they banned major Chinese firms from purchasing products of Micron Technology, saying that they found significant security risks. Do you have any reaction to it?
Yeah, so number one, we're aware of the news. We saw those reports, obviously. We have very serious concerns that with the reports that the PRC has restricted the sale of Micron chips to certain domestic industries. The Department of Commerce is engaging directly with the PRC to make our view clear, and broadly, this action appears inconsistent with the PRC's assertions that it is open for business and committed to a transparent regulatory framework.
And another quick one, there are fake images of explosion outside the Pentagon circulated around on the internet from this morning, I think. So do you have any information on this you can share with us?
I don't. I'm happy to follow up after the briefing.
Sorry, just on Micron, is there anything in your in your guidance there about Huawei?
No, I don't have any comment on
No?
Huawei. No,
Okay,
I think,
so
I think,
I mean,
I think
if
our
you
concerns
guys,
about
if
Huawei
you guys,
are well
if
known.
you guys ban or seek to ban a Chinese company from doing, from conducting business here or overseas, why shouldn't they be allowed to do the same thing?
I will say that we have made clear that there are concerns that we have with Huawei and the use of Huawei technology. That's a national security concern.
But China's allowed to have national security concerns too,
They
aren't they?
are, but as I said, they have made
but
clear
so they're
they
just-
have made clear that they're open for business and said there would be a transparent.
Well, you've made clear that you're open for business
they
too.
They have said they would have a transparent regulatory framework, something I think we have here that does not exist in China.
Okay, but still.
I think the difference is the transparent regulatory framework. I just said the rule of law is quite clear in the United States.
Okay,
Less so.
but well, I don't know. People are talking, there are states in the U.S. that are banning TikTok, right? Not just from government phones, but from all kinds of phones. So
I think I'm.
So, you may be on, solid ground as it relates to the federal government, but and Huawei, but still, why can't the Chinese ban or stop?
The Chinese government, the Chinese
Why,
government.
why can't they?
The Chinese government
even
can
if they don't have a legitimate reason to,
So
why can't they?
They can take every decision that they want to take, obviously, but we believe that it ought to be taken through a transparent regulatory framework. They've said that's what they're going to do. We don't believe they have in this case.
So what's the? All right. Okay. So what are you going to do about it?
As I said, the Department of Commerce is engaging directly with the Chinese government.
State Department spokesman Matt Miller, his first briefing, and we heard AP reporter Matt Lee there. earlier today. It's Matt Miller's first briefing since taking over for previous spokesman Ned Price. You can see the entire State Department briefing from today at cspan.org. That's also where you can find this program as a podcast, specifically on our podcast page at cspan.org/podcasts. You can also find it wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And if you'd like more on the stories that are shaping Washington, you can subscribe to our evening newsletter, word for word. Just go to cspan.org/connect to subscribe. I'm Gary Sterkoff. Thanks a lot for listening today to Washington Today.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Every day we're taking your calls, live, on the air, on the news of the day, and we'll discuss policy issues that impact you. Coming up Tuesday morning, we'll discuss the stalemate over raising the debt ceiling. First with Jeffrey Rosen, President and CEO of the National Constitution Center. We'll continue the conversation and talk about Democratic priorities with Illinois Democratic Congressman Brad Schneider. Then, with Georgia Republican Congressman Rich McCormick, who'll touch on Republican priorities. Also, E&E reporter Kelsey Bruger on the role oil and gas issues are playing in the talks to raise the debt limit, including a proposal to overhaul the permitting process to more quickly jumpstart energy projects. Watch Washington Journal live at 7 Eastern Tuesday morning on C-SPAN or on C-SPAN Now, our free mobile app. Join the discussion with your phone calls, Facebook comments, text messages, and tweets.